Good evening, Rabbi. Yesterday we were asked a very good, interesting question. We talked about it also this morning at the Minyan downstairs. I wanted to fill you in a little bit about this. So it says that the question was, if a woman is nursing, she just had a baby, she's nursing, is she allowed to use a pump on Shabbat to pump the milk and to save the milk and to use it for a later time? This is the question that they asked. So what is the problem with that? Is there an issue with that at all? So the truth is that there is a problem because there is a melacha, there is a prohibition called mefarek. So mefarek means that you're taking out the milk from the udder or the breast of the animal, or whether it's the woman or the mother. And what happens is that this is one of the 39 lamed chet tet melachot of the Shabbat. So it's prohibited to do such a thing like that. So what do you do in a case like that? So as we said this morning, what you do is that try to breastfeed the child, because breastfeeding is okay. Why? Because even though the baby is also taking out the milk from the breast, what's the difference between putting it in a cup and the baby? Because the baby is derech achila. That's the way you eat. That's the way the baby eats. So since that's the way the baby eats, this is the reason why it's allowed to do that. There's no prohibition, because what are you going to do? What, starve the baby? Or what are you going to do? Die, God, chas v'shalom. He has to eat the baby. So there's no other way. That's the only way. So derech achila is okay. There's many things like this, by the way, you should know. That we say that even though certain things are prohibited, but when it comes to derech achila, it's allowed, because that's the way you eat. For instance, there's a prohibition of borer. So what is borer? Borer means that you're picking out two things, one from the other, right? Something you want from something you don't want, two types of foods. So what happens is like this, right? What about when you're eating watermelon, sazantro, whatever. So the question is, when you're eating watermelon, are you allowed to take out the seeds and remove them? So this is a prohibition of borer. But when you're eating, it's allowed. You know what I mean? It's derech achila. What are you going to do? What? You're going to eat the seeds on Shabbat? What? Because it's Shabbat, you're going to eat them? This is not the proper thing to do.
No, you put the watermelon inside, and you take it to the seeds, you take it out.
Exactly. So you're doing borer, but since it's derech achila, that's why it's allowed. You know what I mean? This is the reason why. Otherwise, if it wasn't derech achila, it would not be allowed to do that. So what does that mean? A person can't just sit there on Shabbat and take out the seeds from the watermelon, and remove them for no reason. This is not allowed to do. He's chayav. He's transgressing the prohibition of borer. Same thing also applies, by the way, when you're eating fish, on Shabbat. So what happens is, right, if the fish has bones, you gotta take the bones out. What are you gonna do? Eat the bones? You're gonna choke, So what are you gonna tell me? Oh, but it's borer. You're taking out the bones from the fish. You can't do that. So how am I gonna eat? What am I gonna do? How am I gonna do that? So that's also called derech achila. This is the answer. So therefore, all these things are allowed because it's called derech achila. And seer also the same thing. When you're taking the milk from the breast of the mother, it's called derech achila, and therefore it's mutar. So, but there's also another question that comes up, which is like this: if you have a situation where the mother doesn't want to feed, is having pains because the pressure of the milk in her breast is too much, the pressure is too high, so it's bothering her on Shabbat, it's causing her pain, causing her discomfort. So what do you do in a case like that? What do you do? Just let her suffer like that on Shabbat? So the answer is, that there is a solution for that. The solution is, what you do is that she pumps, uses the pump. Of course, we're talking about here a manual pump. And she uses the pump and she pumps out the milk. But instead of giving it to the baby later on, which is not allowed, as we said, because that's already the prohibition of mefarek, so what they do is that they let it go to waste. So what does that mean? She pumps out the milk and it goes to waste. How does it go to waste? you put it down the sink, right? Whatever, let it go down the sink, or something like that. Or let's say you put it into a cup, but you don't want to save it in the cup. So what you do is you put something like a cleanser inside the cup, some kind of liquid, cleanser, or something which is a bad taste. It gives it a bad taste. So therefore, you know that it's going to waste. So this is the way to do it. You put some soap in there, some liquid soap, or some bleach, whatever, something which makes the milk bad. So if you do it in a way like that, that's allowed to do. Why is it allowed to do it this way? What's the reason why it's allowed? Because there is, it brings it down, doing it this way, to Isur de Rabbanan. It's only a rabbinical prohibition. Why is it rabbinical prohibition this way when you do it? Because it's called melacha she'ena tzricha legufa. You know what that means? It means that we don't need this melacha for the goof, for the body of what we're taking out of the breast. So what that means is that since you're not going to use it, it's going to go to waste. You don't need actually the milk, which is going to waste. So therefore, it's only rabbinical prohibition. So what if it's a rabbinical prohibition? What, that makes it mutar? That makes it allowed? Right? No, it's still not allowed. But because of the suffering of the mother, the rabbis in a case like that, they were not gozer. So therefore, they did agree to let her do that because of the suffering that she has. So therefore, we're doing, in the place of Isur de Rabbanan, rabbinical prohibition, where because of the suffering involved, we're allowing her, the rabbis allowed her to pump the milk out like this and let it go to waste. This is the way it's done, So this way you're solving all the problems. You have no issues like that. So therefore, right, if a person has a baby, this is what they should do. Also, right, there was another question asked which we covered also, but I want to cover a little bit more, which is the issue of heating up things on Shabbat. Because they asked about the milk, if you're allowed to heat up the milk on Shabbat to give it to the baby. So this is also part of the question that they asked about. So the truth is, that heating up the milk is okay depending on how you do it. One thing you cannot do is put the milk into Kli Rishon. What does that mean, Kli Rishon? It's a primary Kli, which is on the fire, or was on the fire, and was removed, recently. So there, you're not allowed to put the milk in there. Why? Because the milk will get cooked. It will get bishul. It will get mebushal. So therefore, Kli Rishon, you're not allowed to do. So what are you allowed to do? How do you heat it up? Let's say you want to make it a little bit warm for the baby. So what you do is you put it into Kli Sheni, as we said, right? What does that mean, Kli Sheni? That means you take the pot or whatever, which was on the fire or on the plata, and you pour it out into a different Kli. So now it's Kli Sheni, it's secondary. So therefore you can put it in there. Why? What's the reason? Why? Because the Gemara says, Kli Sheni Eino Mevashel. The secondary Kli doesn't cook, doesn't have the power to cook. This is what it says in the Gemara. What's the reason, by the way? But it's still hot, right? It's still very, very hot. You just poured it out. So why can't the secondary Kli cook? What's the reason why? It should be able to cook, no? Because it's still very, very hot. So why can't the secondary Kli cook? So there's a Tosfot that explains this, He says like this, Tosfot. Tosfot says, the reason why the secondary Kli cannot cook is because even though it's still as hot as it was before, before you poured it out, here's the thing. The thing is that the temperature is going down, right? So that it's a downward trend of the temperature. Why is that? Because it's not on the fire anymore, right? It was on the fire in the first Kli. The second Kli is not on the fire, so it's a downward trend right now. The temperature is going down. So the rule is, according to Tosfot, and that's the way we go, right? That when the temperature is decreasing, because the fire is not there anymore, so what happens is that at that point, the Kli already cannot cook, even though it's still very, very hot. It could be, 90 degrees, Celsius, right? Which is almost like boiling. But nevertheless, since it's going down, and it's a secondary Kli, which was never on the fire, so therefore we say, in a case like that the Kli cannot cook. The truth is, there are Ashkenazim that are machmir about this. And therefore, right, regarding other things that they make, let's say for the Ashkenazim, when they make tea on Shabbat, it's not like the way we make tea. Why is that? Because we hold the Kli Sheni, as we said, right, the secondary Kli cannot cook. They hold the Kli Sheni can cook, because there is one of their big chachamim that they had, Rabbi Elazar Mimitz, was one of the Balei Tosfot. He wrote that sometimes Kli Sheni can cook in certain cases. What cases are we talking about? When you have something which is kaleh bishul, something which is easy to cook. So therefore, in a case like that, what happens is that in a case like that, it says Rabbi Elazar Mimitz that it can cook. So therefore, right, the Ashkenazim are machmir. So what do the Ashkenazim do? They don't even put Kli, like a tea, into Kli Sheni. They don't do that. What they do is they use either kli shlishi, a third kli, which is poured out, or some even are more machmir. Even that they don't do. So it depends on the custom of the Ashkenazim. There are certain Ashkenazim that have a custom to be very machmir about this. Some of them do kli shlishi is okay. So by us, kli sheni is okay. Why? Because we don't hold that tea, is going to be cooked in a kli sheni. So therefore, mikar adin, according to halacha, it's okay. Some are machmir, because they saw the Ashkenazim, they were machmir. This is the reason why they're machmir. That's why. The Ashkenazim don't do it, so they think, it's also forbidden for us. But the truth is, for us, it's not forbidden. For us, it's okay to put in kli sheni. Whatever it may be. So therefore, whatever it is, right, you want to heat up something on Shabbat, the rule is like this, that if it's something which is liquid, like we said, right, the mother's milk. So there, in a case like that, what we do is that we don't put it in kli rishon, we put it in kli sheni. So that also includes other types of liquids, whatever you want to heat up, whatever it is that you may want to heat up. Let's say you want to heat up some soup, or you want to heat up something like that, some coffee, whatever, which has got cold, right? So you want to heat it up. So the rule is that when it comes to things like this, you're not allowed to put it into kli rishon, but you're allowed to put it into kli sheni, into secondary kli. This way, right, it won't cook, and it'll get warm, whatever, it'll get pretty hot like that, maybe it won't be super, super hot, but, it'll do the job somewhat. But when it comes to something which is dry, okay, so that's a little bit different. So what does that mean? According to our custom, the custom by us is that if it's something which is dry, it doesn't have a broth, so the rule is that you're allowed to put it on the plata directly. That's what we do, directly on the plata. What's the reason why? Because Maran Rabbi, he made a chidush a little bit on this. He said his chidush was that when it comes to something which is dry, okay, and you're putting it on the plata, the Ashkenazim, they don't put it directly on the plata. The reason is because they say michzik kin bashel. You know what that means? It looks like he's cooking. It looks like he's cooking. He's not really cooking because it's already cooked. But it looks like it's marit ayin, so therefore he doesn't do it. That's what he says. But according to Maran Avadia, he says this is not like that. It doesn't really look like it's cooking. What's the reason why? Because it's not really the derech to cook on the plata. The plata is not really for cooking so much. Even though technically speaking it can cook, the plata, it can cook. But that's not really the derech of the plata to cook, So therefore the rule is that since it doesn't really look like you're cooking, since it's not the way to cook on it, he relies on the opinion of the Rashba, who says the Rashba is not talking about plata, because when Rashba was alive, there was no plata. But what we're saying is, right, the Rashba says that if you're doing it in a way which doesn't look like you're cooking, so then it's okay. What did he mean to say by that? He meant to say that you put it on, let's say, on top of a kli. You have a kli on the plata, some kind of kli rishon, and you put it on top of that, and it gets very, very hot, but it's not the way to cook like that, on one kli on top of the other. So therefore, the Rashba says it's allowed. So therefore, Maran comes and says, this also applies to the plata as well. So what does that mean? According to Maran, you're allowed to put hot or cold food, dry food, directly on the plata, without any issues. What does that mean? Let's say you want to have some chalot, which are toasted, right? Toasted chalot. So you're allowed to toast the chalot on Shabbat. Yeah, you can put it on the plata and toast it, according to what we just said. No problem. Well, let's say you want to heat up some dish, I'll give you an example, by the way. We'll finish with this. I want to do a read that can keep you too long. But there's also another thing, very, very interesting, which is that Maran, when he used to come for Shabbat Shlishit to his house, they say, he would tell his Rabbanit. Her name was Margolit. So he would tell her, put the fish on the plata, and heat it up. So you know how it is, right? The Sfardim, how do they make the fish? They make it with a sauce, with the rotev. You know what I mean? So the question is, what do you say? Are you getting hungry? Yosef.
How about coffee and sugar?
I'm sorry?
Coffee and sugar.
What about coffee and sugar?
You need kli sheni or?
Okay, just give me a second to finish this. I will cover that also with Hashem. Remind me. Don't let me finish before. Okay. So I just want to finish this one on. So it says we're saying like this, right? That Maran used to tell his wife, his Rabbanit, put the fish on the plata, no problem. So why is no problem? So the truth is, that fish lichora, if it has sauce, it should be a problem because it's rotev there. It's wet, right? It's liquid. So why isn't that a problem? This is the question, So the rule is like this, that if it's the majority of the dish is dry, and a minority is wet, is liquid. So there we say that we go according to the majority. This is the reason why. Why is that, by the way? Why should we go according to the majority? But there's also liquid there, which is being cooked, right? How can you do that? We just said you can't cook liquid. So the answer is that we said it needs to make veralo, right? What does that mean? It's when the drier it gets, the worse it gets. It gets dried out, So therefore, it's not good for it to dry out. So therefore, we're not concerned about that. And this is the reason why he was allowing his Rabbani to put the fish on the plata, Seudah Shlishit, to eat hot fish on Shabbat, on Shabbat, right? That's the idea. So therefore, he allowed that. This is the thing. So regarding your question, right? You're asking about coffee, right? So coffee, okay. The truth is, that if you ever really looked into coffee, you're gonna see one thing. Doesn't matter what coffee is, by the way. Turkish coffee, instant coffee, freeze-dried, all the types of coffee that we have today, they're all cooked already. Did you know that? Yeah. They're roasted. They're roasted in the oven, So therefore, since they're already cooked, so we're not concerned anymore that it's going to be cooked again. And bishul achare bishul, that's what we say, right? There's no cooking after cooking when it comes to dry things, So therefore, right, since the coffee is dry originally, right? Originally it was dry. So therefore, right, we say that we don't care about that. It's dry. When we make coffee, it's dry, right? So therefore, we don't care about that. So if you're talking about instant coffee, just to make some coffee, right? No problem. Why? Because it was already cooked before. So now you're cooking it again? No problem. Same thing with the sugar, by the way. It was already cooked. So therefore, since these things were already cooked one time, we say, and bishul achar bishul. And therefore, it's mutar. So what does that mean? You can put straight hot water on the coffee and sugar and make the kli rishon, no problem. You can make kli sheni, whatever. Right? You can make the coffee like that. That's not an issue regarding that. The Ashkenazim here also, they're machmir about this. So you want to know why? Yeah.
Shabbat.
Yeah. Doesn't matter. Yeah, nothing. No problem. Yeah, no problem. The truth is, you don't really need a thermos for Shabbat. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, coffee, no problem, because it's cooked already. Baked. But the Ashkenazim, they're machmir about this. You know why? I'll tell you when we finish here. I don't want to keep you too long. So the Ashkenazim, do you know what they say? That it's true. And bishul acharei bishul. There's no cooking after cooking. One time you cooked it, it's already cooked. They agree with that. But what they say is that there's different types of cooking. There's baking, there's roasting, and there's boiling. And there's tzliya, right? Roasting. So there's different types of cooking, or frying. Tigun, right? So they say that when we say and bishul acharei bishul, there's no cooking after cooking. That means if it was the same type of cooking. But here with the coffee, first it was roasted in the oven, and then it got boiled, in the water. It's not the same type of cooking. So for them, this is achzarut, they cannot do it this way. But we can do. Yeah, we can. Yes. No problem. What about tea bag? Good question. Okay, so tea bag, right, as when we started, we talked about that, but I'll repeat it again one more time. What happens with tea bag is like this, that according to our custom, the custom is that we put it into kli sheni. That's okay. What does that mean? You first take it out of the urn, right, to the hot, like we have over here, same thing. You have also maybe in your house something like that, right? So if you have, if you don't have, you should buy it for Shabbat. It's good. They have a special one for Shabbat. They have a special one. Yeah, it's good to have hot water on Shabbat. Yeah. So whatever you have, right? Whatever is it you have. I have something like that. So what you do is you put it into a cup, and once you put it in the cup, that's already kli sheni. That's already secondary kli. So then you can put the tea bag inside. Some are machmir. They first, what they do is that they first they put it into another kli, third kli, But we don't have to do that. It's not really necessary, So according to our custom, once you put it into the cup, but don't put. Let me just tell you one thing. I told you, right? You can use a cup and put the water in there, and then put the tea bag, right? But don't put the tea bag before the water. You understand? Put the tea bag after the water. You know why? Because if you put it before the water, what happens is that the hot water, which is coming from the kli rishon, from the first kli, is going to cook it like that a little bit. A little bit. So therefore, the rule is first put the hot water in there in the cup, and then the tea bag. Baruch Adonai le'olam. והודיחה להם, השומר, הקדוש ברוך הוא לעשות לישראל, לפיכך הכיר בא להם תורה ומצוות שנאמר אדוני חפץ, למען צדקו יגדיר תורה בידי. אמן, ישוע מברך לעולם ולעולם.